a couple of moments. Wow, really great. That's wonderful. What a great story.
We felt like success that we got the film done against all odds. There's so few representations of immigrants in this culture. And then there's really no representations of immigrants in rebellion. This is a film about immigrant activists attacking the detention center from within. This is not the immigrant border jumper story. This is not the immigrant as a victim in America story. This is a story about immigrant power, something we really don't see representations of. And so just getting the film done and getting to the festival, we felt like, we're kind of success, I guess. And then when it was announced that we got an award, our head was spinning. And then when it was announced we got 2 awards, it just, our heads kind of blew up, you know what I mean? And we were just so happy. And that lasted about 3 weeks, because about 3 weeks later, ICE targeted one of the people featured in the film, a man named Claudio Rojas. Folks who saw the film would know him. And he's been going through these routine ICE check-ins like so many immigrants across the country, walking voluntarily into an ICE building to report in and say, I've had no crimes occurred, etc. And they detained Claudio 3 weeks after the film premiered. And we went into this kind of nightmare. We went from heaven to hell, kind of reliving the story of the film, because he was the reason the Infiltrators went to Broward, was to get him free. And he'd been free for 7 years now, and then they took him again. And so last year, the whole release of the film turned upside down, as it was all kind of oriented towards trying to stop his deportation again.
Right.
And failing. We failed under the Trump administration. There was no, we had letters, the usual thing. We had all kinds of assets in the campaign. The activists were engaged, got a private bill submitted to Congress, letters from the whole film community, all kinds of things, and nothing would stop the Trump administration from shattering this family after they've been here for 20 years. Claudio's a grandfather. Just an absurd and painful, horrible situation, but one of many that folks in the advocacy community are too familiar with. So that was kind of it. You know, we had 3 weeks of real happiness for the success of the film, and then everything got really complicated after that.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. Well, that is really a story. That's really something amazing. Just a reminder to everyone who is watching, if you have questions for Mr. Rivera or for Sarah, myself, please chat those into us. Looks like we've got some things starting to populate there. Let's see what we have. Let's see. Jose, you can't see yourself on camera. You can see and hear everyone but yourself. Right, and I believe that, let's see, we have some protocols in place. Let me check on that. I believe that only the presenter, only a couple people have voice and audio. I'm not sure. But if you do have a question, just chat those into us, please. Here we have a question for you, Alex. How did you get the shots inside the detention center? Did ICE, Geo give you permission, or did you all get good notes and redo them?
Okay. That's interesting. I'd be super curious to hear if other people, well, I guess I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. If it's regarding the sequences inside the detention center involving Marco's character and Claudio's character, where we meet Benny and Sean and that whole drama, that's all recreated with actors. And we tried to really forefront that to not confuse people, labeling the actors and all of that, and trying to make it clear when you're in the world of documentary and kind of real people or in this world of reproduction. However, we do see into the detention center at certain moments of the film from above through these aerial shots. And those, we also label them as the real detention center, because that is the real detention center. And again, folks who are in the advocacy world would know that that detention center in South Florida is not typical of the system. We try to mention it again in the film, that it's kind of known as this sort of model detention center, like the crown jewel of the detention system. It's painted pink and has all this kind of astroturf in the courtyard. And it's the detention center where they take Congress people and show them, oh, this is a detention center. And then they walk out and say, oh, it's like a summer camp, without acknowledging that the other 200 centers are places of great misery. But this detention center, nonetheless, people are incarcerated, but it's pink, so it's this kind of pink prison. But there's multiple ways of seeing the place in our film, sometimes from the outside, but when we're really inside it, that's recreation.
Right. Well, so where did you guys just shoot on a soundstage then? We
shot it in a facility here in Southern California called Lanterman. It's a decommissioned mental health facility.
Oh, wow.
Out near Pomona. Yeah, and Vidi, one of the infiltrators, in our interviews and conversations with her, she said that it felt kind of like a mental institution, the Broward Detention Center, the kind of sterility and heavy institutional architecture and fluorescent light, and and then there are some images of the hallways and of the lunchroom that we were able to find at a website called dvidshub.net, and that's a website maintained by the Defense Department that releases footage from the U.S. government to press outlets.
Okay.
So they have very sanitized B-roll of pretty much everything Homeland Security is doing, the Defense Department, etc. So there are some images of all the detention centers. Well, let me say many of them. Many of the detention centers, including Broward. So we were able to see the hallways, see the lunchroom, the nurses' station in this kind of news footage. So we had a sense of what it looked like from that as well. And this facility in California really was a good match.
Wow. Wow. How did you guys find that facility?
Which facility?
The one that you filmed it in California.
California. Oh yeah. We had a location scout. Once we pretty much once we had edited the documentary and wrote the screenplay for the recreation elements, we had basically a 60-page script to shoot, and we needed actors, locations, crew, all the usual stuff. And so we worked with a producer, Darren Dean, and co-producer Mark Mathis, and others to bring a crew together. But it was a pretty traditional process in terms of a casting director finding the actors, a location scout, or location manager sending out scouts to find the locations, and all of that. What was not traditional is everything we were shooting was going to be woven back into this already edited documentary. That was the weird part.
Huh. Neat. That's a really neat process that you went through.
Yeah.
That's inspiring for movies. Thank you. We have a question here from Jose. Alex, comparing Obama and the present administration, what is the biggest difference in dealing with ICE? At times in the last 3 years, I'm in the belief that crimes against humanity are committed by ICE. Would you be able to shoot the same movie under the present administration? So 2 questions. The first one, what's the biggest difference dealing with ICE now as opposed to Obama administration? And second question, would you be able to shoot the same movie under the current administration?
I think that activists featured in the film, and probably activists and advocates who might be in this group right now, would have more to say about these 2 administrations. But to me, just in like 2 sentences, it felt like under Obama, what I saw was activists able to find some leverage, that the deportation machine under Obama was out of control, deporting historic numbers. But if you could organize and make noise, you could get some leverage, and maybe you could get your mom out of detention, or you could stop a deportation here or there. Under this administration, it seems like I haven't heard of a lot of activists who've managed to find that leverage to get positive discretion or relief, get ICE to do the right thing, and let families stay together while they figure out their status, etc. So
right.
That seems to be the difference. And I would agree that crimes against humanity are being committed now. I think they were being committed under the Obama administration as well. But in terms of the film, though, it's all of this creates visual challenges. How do you tell an immigrant story when under this regime, where now it's kind of clear there's a pattern under the Trump administration of them using ICE as a political apparatus to target activists, to target immigrants who speak out. And that's terrifying. That's something that a lot of immigrants would recognize from their home countries where they've experienced fascism, the government knocking on your door because of something that you said. And immigrants across the country, thinking of Robbie Rogbir in New York City with the New Sanctuary Coalition, obviously Claudio Rojas featured in our film, but there's a pattern of this happening now. And so how do you tell stories? How do you advocate for immigrants? How can immigrants advocate for themselves when ICE is being used to politically punish people?
Mm-hmm.
And these are scary and difficult questions, you know?
Do you think you would be able to shoot under the current administration? I guess if you were able to.
I mean, with this film, when we released it, everybody knew their names were going to be in the film, and people had the analysis that by being present, you could be more powerful. And this story of the infiltration was also told by This American Life. When they told it, they used everybody's names,
Mm-hmm.
but we're all kind of dealing with this changing regime and what is and isn't possible. So right now, I think it's very possible to write scripts and to create the recreated part of this movie we could do. And for what it's worth, Blumhouse Television, which is Blumhouse is a studio here in Hollywood that they're known for the Jordan Peele movies like Get Out and Us, and they're known for Paranormal Activity.
Mm-hmm.
They're a famous company, but they've optioned our film to turn it into a scripted TV series. So the idea of telling this story in the performative way, I think is absolutely doable and necessary and might actually happen.
Right.
In terms of documentary and bringing undocumented voices into the public realm, or them bringing their own voice to the public realm, I think it's a lot of minefields, a lot of mines out there in the minefield, because you don't know what's going to happen. I don't think the shadows and staying quiet offers a lot of hope, but coming out and speaking up does clearly offer some risks. So how to go forward, I don't know. I would turn to all of us as I think anybody knows as much about this as the next person. It's a complicated time.
Yeah.
Sad time.
Definitely. Yeah. Now more than ever, a voice is necessary. Definitely. Um, yeah. I don't quite know where we're going with this, but hopefully November will have a little bit of change. Have you stayed in touch with people, and if the different, not only the actors, but also those individuals? Clearly, you're in touch with some of the individuals in the film, but who else have you been in touch with, and what is the impact of the film making process been for them? Did other than these very clear life-changing events that you've just shared with us, if
Yeah.
any other things that you were able to find?
Yeah. No, thankfully, everyone else involved in the film as well. And they're all kind of the film, the final sort of scene or sequence of the film kind of updates the audience on kind of where everybody is and what they're doing. And that's pretty much held. Marco is in New York, working at his family's restaurant, involved in various types of activism locally. Viridiana has a group called Alerta Migratoria in North Carolina, and working on deportation cases there, and also looking towards maybe getting involved in DC. But yeah, they're all kind of doing their thing, and they've been differently involved in events around the film, organizing screenings, attending screenings, speaking to the press, etc.
Nice, excellent. We are there any other questions? Jose or Jana, either of you have anything you'd like to ask Alex?
Hi. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, especially Sarah, because I know that she has a lot of experience in the Pearsall Detention Center, and just I want to see some things about the film from her perspective. And so, Sarah, could I ask you a question? How does the portrayal of the Broward Detention Center compare to what you see when you visit Pearsall?
So, following off of what Alex said, I was shocked at watching the film and seeing that individuals were in these smaller rooms with just a couple of beds, that they could walk in and out of their rooms whenever they wanted to. At the South Texas Detention Complex in Pearsall, it's very similar to other facilities where I visited around the country, as well as several here in Texas, where most individuals are held in one big room that has anywhere between 70 and 100 bunk beds. There's tables there in the room and TVs and telephones, but it's really just one massive room. And anytime they want to go anywhere, they have to be accompanied by a guard. And there's a lot of levels of doors that they have to get buzzed through. They typically only also have 1 hour of recreation time a day. So the facility was physically very different, and in terms of their freedom of movement and their ability to be outside, I was very, very surprised to see there were any facilities like that in the country. Of course, being deprived of your liberty doesn't really change the way that you're going to feel about being in detention, regardless of how quote unquote nice the facilities might be. So that was one thing that was surprising to me. Another thing in watching the film, from an attorney perspective, we have the ability to go in during pretty much any time during the day, including on Saturdays and Sundays, and bring in paperwork, pick up paperwork. It is typical that non-attorneys are not allowed to pick up or drop off paperwork. That does stay with attorneys. And so, one of the questions I had for the film crew is, were there any attorneys involved in the activism efforts? Because we've worked locally here in Texas with several different community groups, and each of our groups has different strengths, and I found it to be particularly productive when we work with community advocates who have contacts with the press, who will get letter writing campaigns going, who will contact members of Congress. We've seen some good results because of that public pressure and just the overall community awareness. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why we're hosting calls like this and trying to bring important films like the Infiltrators to the community, because these are discussions that are important, and the more that we have them, the more people know what's going on, the more that we can more effectively advocate, and that does have very real world consequences and positive results for individuals in detention. So, I was a little bit curious to know kind of what that process was like in terms of trying to reach out to attorneys to help on some of these cases, and also was wondering, and I know there's a short time frame on some of this, right? Which is one of the things that I think the film talked about well and is important to keep in mind. Sometimes people don't know when they're going to get deported until a few hours before, and you have to act very urgently. But that aside, it seems like some of the documents could have been mailed back and forth. And so I'm just wondering, if that was something that the facility wasn't allowing, and more broadly, if there's been any positive changes at the facility as a result of the film being made.
Sorry, there's some folks working outside if there's noise. So thank you so much for the thoughts, and thank you for taking me and us into what you've seen at the detention center. I've seen footage of those kind of giant sort of warehouse-like rooms where 100 men might be in other detention centers, and so I'm familiar with that. But yeah, that's not the case at Broward. We actually gathered all the real infiltrators and Claudio and everybody for a kind of workshop to watch the film in progress before we shot the reenactment. So we did a version with documentary material and then drawings to kind of map out the story we were telling. Then we gathered everybody together to see what we were doing so that they could kind of input, feedback, and course correct our imagined version of what they had lived. And one of the things we did was put tape on the floor, and they showed us kind of like the size of the cell, where the beds were and all of that. So they were six to a room is what's at Broward. There's a question about space and freedom of movement. And it seems like, yeah, and you can see in some of the drone shots how the facility is with the flow between the inside and outside spaces. But in terms of the question of attorneys working with them, the group didn't have an attorney on the ground working with them. It's probably best if they speak to why and their relationship with attorneys in general, but this entire action was pulled off by undocumented youth and one citizen ally who was their local ally and contact, incredibly. And then your last question was about, or the last thought, I'm trying to remember what it was.
Well, perhaps I can follow up on that a little bit.
That's what it was, the mail. You'd asked about the mail. Yeah, so the mail, so it's funny, we actually shot a scene with in the recreation space with the detainees, with Marco and Claudio and Benny talking about how slow the mail is. That the mail, to get something out, in and out, and it's a 2-week process to get something mailed. And so when they were facing the deportation of Samuel on this kind of incredibly short ticking clock, and they needed to get him to file his asylum application, they needed to move the papers with speed. And so that was the pressure, the ticking clock in that sequence, that they felt the deportation was impending and needed the papers to get out right away. But in the edit room, we felt like the scene of them talking about the mail was just sort of slowing it down. So yeah, but a good question.
Yeah, and I think that's particularly relevant right now because of COVID-19. Most attorneys are not going to detention centers in person. And so we're seeing a lot more of a time lag in being able to get basic paperwork signed. I was working with an individual who's HIV positive, and even being very proactive and moving things as quickly as we could, it still took us several days to get the necessary paperwork we needed to be able to contact ICE about his case. And so I was trying to liaise a little bit with ICE officers to get them to go and meet with him and sign the paperwork, and so they would have it directly. But I wasn't able to get someone who was going to do that for me. So they basically, are requiring that it takes about a week from the time that somebody goes to a library to look up the paper, to get the paperwork, to make a photocopy, to mail it out, to be received by us. And then if we have to mail it back, if we can send it by email, which more things are moving by email now, that's great. But otherwise, it's very time consuming. And if I'm sending paperwork to someone, the same thing. So far, I think the judges have been pretty understanding that things are taking a little bit longer than normal. But it's a hard thing for individuals to explain when they get before a judge and they're nervous and don't really quite understand all the logistics from our side. One of the other things on the space that I thought was interesting is how there were contact visits. So the detention centers vary a lot that I've been to, but it's typically either that there are no contact visits, which is the case at Pearsall, or the contact visits are very limited. And that's very hard on the families. As I think the film talked about, undocumented family members can't even go to the facility. So I was wondering if maybe you could comment briefly on sort of the impact on the families of this whole process. So, both what you noticed in the separation and the stress of detention and not knowing if they were going to be deported, but also sort of how the filmmaking process played into the family's emotional state. Were they more hopeful to having that support and knowing that something was happening? Was it more scary for them because the public was paying attention to them? What were some of the conversations you had with the families, either directly or indirectly?
Yeah, so I guess a couple things. I mean, um, there were a lot of different sort of formerly detained people that were involved in making the film, and all the relationships and their reactions were as different as people are. But without exception, whenever we found somebody who had been in Broward during this time, they knew Marco, they knew Vidi, they knew of the campaign, and they wanted to participate in the film to thank them, because they felt like things got better in the facility after this campaign. This campaign prodded Representative Deutsch in Florida and 20 other, I think it was 22 other members of Congress who wrote a letter to ICE demanding a review, a case-by-case review of Broward. So a lot of the detainees wanted to participate to thank the activists. Claudio, you know, I spoke a little bit about how we gathered everybody to sort of do a memory workshop. When we actually went to film all of the recreations, we invited everybody to come to California, but most folks couldn't make it except Claudio. Claudio came to set and was with us for a month, living in our house and driving to set with us every morning to work with the art department, hair and makeup, to consult with the actor who was portraying him. And being in a recreated detention center was clearly an emotional experience for him. He had spent about 7 months in the detention center around the time of the infiltration. And had before that, because that was his second time in, he had spent 3 months in with his son together at Broward. And so to see the orange jumpsuits again, to see the cell, to walk through that space, and then to see people recreating what he had lived, it clearly was an emotional experience for him. But I think it was a different emotional experience for the crew and everybody involved in the project to feel that. So, you know, I think and he has said publicly, and he can be contacted if you ever want to do an event with him. He speaks Spanish. He's very he's very articulate and very available to do these kind of events. But he's said multiple times that he wanted to do this to thank Marco and to thank the activists, you know. And yeah, so but I think what you're asking is a universe of answers in terms of all the different ways the film has touched people who were involved in it.
It's always amazing how the work we do completely changes other people's lives. I mean, the stories you're telling me about Claudio and everything that he's gone through to get this film to where it's at, and then to still wind up being deported, that is just an atrocity. That is an atrocity. We have a couple of comments. Jose would like to say thank you very much for the film. Alex, he really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for that. And we have a question, I guess maybe this is kind of directed to Sarah, wanting to know what exactly is happening at the Texas border right now. If you could put that in a little peanut statement. And I'm just going to say this before Sarah launches into that piece. Everyone, please send us your email if you want to be on the listserv for our next film screening, and we'll be sure to have you on that list when it comes out. Thank you all for joining us, but let me go ahead and turn over to Sarah with that final question of what's happening at the border now.
Right. Thank you, Paul. So there is several things that have been happening. The Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP program, is still active, and basically all those hearing dates have been pushed back because of COVID-19. So people are being required to stay in Mexico. Often they're living in tent cities for much longer periods of time. It's unclear, of course, when this situation is going to get better. So there's a lot of sense of desperation. In fact, that's something that we see typically at the detention center as well. So one of the things we do a lot as attorneys is manage depression and manage hope, right? We need to help people not be super depressed, but we also don't want to give false hope. And so it's a very trying experience for people. There's a couple of other things that are happening specifically for those who are able to get into the country. They're being denied asylum pretty much across the board if they enter July 16th, 2019 or later under the president's proclamation, third country ban that's being litigated. We do have some information about that we've sent out on our listservs, and we'll be continuing to keep people updated on that. And then the CDC guidelines have been interpreted by the administration to allow them to basically stop processing asylum cases. So there are two different statutory provisions: Title 42, which gives the CDC authority to take actions to protect the health of individuals in the U.S., and then Title 8, which gives people the right to seek asylum in this country. And there's nothing in neither of those statutes that says Title 42 can subsume and push down the right to and cancel the right to seek asylum. In fact, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees recently came out and said that is not legal and in line with the treaties that the United States has signed, and that basically we need to process asylum cases. We need to do that safely. We can implement quarantines and take other measures to make sure that we're protecting everyone in the United States, both outside detention and within the facilities. We will be sending more updates on what's going on with relations to COVID-19 and how that's impacting people who are currently at the detention facility. So stay tuned for that. I would just say in closing that it's really important to have people on the ground working one-on-one with individuals. I think the film very effectively showed that. And we certainly see that in our work as well. And there's nothing like being able to really talk to someone and spend the time going through their cases and working on getting the documents and doing the advocacy. So, it's very encouraging to see, the courage that people found and expressed in, going into the facilities. And then also, the advocacy that from the individuals all the way up to the filmmakers to get the story out there.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sarah. I guess that is going to be it for us. Is there any other question? Alex, thank you so much again for being here. Any questions? Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Alex, for putting out such a wonderful body of work. Stay brilliant at it. Really good job. Thank you so much.
You. I just wanted to put it out there. Thank you so much for hosting this dialogue. And if anyone enjoyed the film and wants to see it again or share it with anybody, I've put the website right here on my little picture, infiltratorsfilm.com. And if you rent the film there, because we're doing this kind of weird digital cinema thing where the theatrical release was killed, and so we're instead streaming the film. But if you stream it at our website, half of the proceeds go to the family of Claudio Rojas. So that's about $5 per ticket sold, goes straight to supporting him and his fight to come home. If you spread the film at all, we'd really appreciate if you spread it through infiltratorsfilm.com rather than anywhere else. But thank you so much for having the dialogue, and I hope we can all gather in person sometime soon. But thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Thanks so much, Riley. Thanks for setting everything up. Thank you, Sarah.